Welcome to HFY Codex. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. The cold morning snow fell slowly from the sky, covering the broken buildings and cracked ground in a thin white sheet, making the ruined city look soft. Even peaceful, but it was not peaceful. Not at all. The air was cold enough to freeze breath in midair. And the few remaining fires from the night glowed weakly under metal scraps and old fuel cans. Even the rats avoided this part of the colony now. A human soldier named Ethan walked through the snow-covered alleyways, his boots crunching over ice and dirt, his rifle slung over his shoulder, but forgotten for now. He wasn't patrolling, just searching. Maybe for something useful, maybe for someone still alive. Most of the colony had been abandoned after the raids. Alien slavers had come in the night, ships like giant beetles blocking the sky. Families taken, homes burned. Those who survived were either hiding or dying. Ethan was one of the few humans who had stayed behind, not because he was brave, but because he had no other place to go. As he turned a corner near an old-school building, he heard a sound. It was so soft he almost missed it, a quiet sniffle. Like someone trying not to cry, he stopped, crouched behind a pile of bent metal, and listened again. The sound came again. Clearer this time, a child's voice, whispering something. He moved slowly, careful not to scare whoever it was, his hand resting on his sidearm, just in case. But what he saw made him freeze in place. A small alien girl stood barefoot in the snow, her thin arms wrapped around something under her cloak. Her skin was pale blue and almost glowing, her eyes large and purple, filled with tears. And on her face was a look of hunger and fear too big for someone so small. In her arms was an even smaller alien infant, barely moving, its head resting weakly against her shoulder. The older girl looked up at Ethan, her lips trembling. And then she whispered in broken English, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Just milk for my sister, please. I'll pay you back when I'm grown." Ethan didn't speak right away. He just stared, his brain trying to catch up with what his eyes saw. These two weren't a threat. They were barely surviving. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, his voice low. The girl hesitated, then looked down, as if ashamed. 3 days, she said. No food, no warm, no mama. Ethan felt a tight knot in his chest. He'd seen death before, too much of it, but this was something else. This was a child trying to save another child. He knelt down, pulling off his gloves and reaching into his pack. He had an emergency ration pack with some protein paste and a small container of synthetic milk. He opened the milk and held it out. The girl took it slowly, gently, then pulled the baby into her arms and fed her drop by drop, her hands shaking, but steady enough to not spill. The baby moved, weakly at first, then more strongly, sucking from the container like she hadn't eaten in days, which was probably true. Ethan watched in silence, the cold wind biting his face, but he didn't care. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl looked at him again, her big eyes full of hope now. "Just a little Lyra," she said. "And she's Naya." Ethan nodded. "Okay, Lyra, you two can't stay out here," he said. "Come with me. I have shelter, heat, and more food." She looked unsure, her body tense. But after a long second, she nodded. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her and the baby, then gently lifted them into his arms. They were so light, it scared him. Back in his hideout, a basement under an old repair shop, Ethan lit a small fire and gave them more food. Lyra never let go of Naya, not even when she was offered a warm blanket or a place to rest. She kept whispering things to the baby, singing soft songs in a language Ethan didn't know. That night, as the wind howled outside, Ethan sat near the fire, watching them sleep. He had no idea who they were, what species they came from, or what their past held, but he knew one thing clearly: he was going to protect them now. Not because he had to, but because no one else would. And because when Lyra had whispered that plea in the cold, it had broken something deep inside him. And maybe, just maybe, started to heal something too. Lyra woke to the warmth of firelight and the soft hum of a heater nearby. Her eyes blinked slowly, still unsure if the safety around her was real. For 3 days, the cold had been her only blanket. Now she was wrapped in something that didn't bite her skin. Beside her, Neha was curled into a ball under the thick human coat, breathing softly, her tiny chest rising and falling like it was never in danger. Like she wasn't almost lost in the snow. Ethan stirred a pot near the fire, something that smelled like beans and spices. The scent made Lyra's stomach twist in hunger. But she stayed still, watching him, trying to understand why he had helped. Most humans avoided her kind, the Zeralan, calling them pests or leftovers from a broken alliance. They were weak, small, not worth saving. At least, that's what the soldiers had said before the sky burned. Ethan didn't speak right away. He poured the hot stew into a metal bowl and placed it near her feet, then returned to his seat across the room without saying a word. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was careful. Like two animals studying each other, unsure if trust was safe. Lyra reached for the bowl, sniffed it, then took a small bite. Her fingers shaking, but the warmth that filled her chest made her eyes water again. She hadn't cried when the raiders took her mother. Hadn't cried when the cold scraped her skin raw. But now, over soup, the tears came easy. "You don't have to pay me back," Ethan said softly, breaking the silence. "You're not a debt." Lyra looked down at the bowl, her voice thin. "My people always say, never take what you cannot return." Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling like he was thinking hard. "Then return it by living," he said. "That's more than enough." Neha made a soft cooing sound in her sleep. Lyra smiled gently and tucked the blanket tighter around her sister. She didn't know if Ethan was lying or just strange, but his words had weight. They pressed gently on her fear and made it smaller. Later that day, Ethan showed her the rest of the basement shelter. There were old tools, some clean water, and a stash of supplies he had gathered before the colony fell. It wasn't much, but to Lyra, it was a palace. She found a small crate of dry books, stories in human language, some with pictures, and flipped through them like they were treasure. Ethan smiled quietly and said she could keep them. As the sun fell and the cold returned outside, Lyra asked a question she had been holding in her chest all day. "Why didn't you walk past me, like the others did?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at the fire again, then pulled a small photo from his chest pocket. It was old and worn, the edges frayed. A little girl with freckles smiled up from the picture, holding a teddy bear twice. "Her size, my sister," he said. "She died during the siege. No one helped her either." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She lowered her head in respect. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ethan gave a sad smile. "That's why I stopped," he said, "because this time I could." That night, the wind outside howled like a beast looking for its next victim. But inside the shelter, there was only the sound of breathing and crackling flames. Lyra curled up with Neha, but her thoughts didn't drift to hunger or fear like before. Now they drifted to questions, to hope, to what this place could become. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe more cold, maybe soldiers, maybe nothing at all. But she knew that for now, she had warmth, food, and a human who didn't walk away. And that was more than she had dared to dream just 2 days ago. 3 days passed in quiet peace, the kind of peace that felt like a dream stretched thin, always close to breaking. Lyra helped where she could, folding blankets, boiling water, cleaning old cans for reuse. She was young, but her hands were careful, her eyes focused. She worked like someone who had known loss too early and never wanted to feel helpless again. Naya was growing stronger too, her cheeks fuller, her eyes brighter. She giggled sometimes now, a sound that filled the room like music. Even Ethan smiled when he heard it, though he always tried to hide it behind his mug of bitter coffee. It was morning when the sound came, a deep rumble far above. Like thunder, but slower, heavier. Ethan paused mid-step and tilted his head toward the ceiling. Lyra froze, holding Naya tight in her arms. "What's that?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He moved fast, grabbed his old scope from the shelf, and ran up the metal stairs to the upper level. Lyra followed, her feet light, her heart pounding. Outside, through a narrow crack in the boarded-up window, Ethan looked through the scope toward the sky. A ship hovered in the distance. Not a human one. Not sleek and sharp like Earth designs. This one was shaped like a bloated beetle, its shell cracked with burn marks. It's the same type that had raided the colony before. "They're back," Ethan said quietly. Lyra gripped the window frame. Her breath shallow. "Slavers," she whispered. Ethan nodded once, his face tight. "We need to move," he said. "If they scan the ground, they'll find heat. And they'll come hunting." Back downstairs, they packed quickly. Only what was needed: food, blankets, a small heat coil. Ethan stuffed his rifle with the last of the energy cells and checked the knife on his belt. Lyra wrapped Naya in layers. Tucking her clothes, she was silent the whole time, her fear hidden behind a face of calm she had learned to wear. Ethan led them through the old sewer tunnels beneath the colony, the walls damp and dark, the air thick with dust and echoes. He moved with purpose, like he'd done this before, like he had a plan hidden deep in the bones of the city. They traveled for over an hour, passing rusted doors and long-dead lights. Lyra didn't speak. She only followed, holding Naya like a treasure she would never give up. Finally, they reached an old chamber sealed by a thick steel door. Ethan tapped a code into a side panel, and with a groan, the door slid open. Inside was another room, smaller but clean, filled with supplies, a backup shelter Ethan had built long ago and never used. Until now, they settled quickly, but no one slept that night. From far above, the sound of engines rumbled again. Closer this time, the sky hunters were searching, and it was only a matter of time before they came down. Lyra sat beside Ethan near the fire, Naya asleep in her lap. She looked at him and spoke softly. "If they find us, what will you do?" Ethan didn't look at her. He stared into the flames. "I'll fight," he said. "I won't let them take you." Lyra nodded, her eyes serious. "And I'll help," she said. "You're a child," Ethan replied, his voice low. "I'm a sister," Lyra said. "That's more." Ethan looked at her, then really looked, and saw something in her that shook him. Not pity, not weakness, but something hard and bright like the edge of a blade. She had survived the cold. She had fed her sister when others walked past. And now, she was ready to stand. Ethan knew then that she wasn't just someone to protect. She was someone worth standing beside. Outside, the wind shifted. The hunters were coming, but this time, so were they. The night burned with red light, not from fire, but from the sky itself. Through the small cracks in the sewer ceiling, faint glows of moving beams swept the streets above. The slaver ship was scanning the ground, slowly, methodically, like a predator dragging its claws across old wounds. Inside the shelter, Lyra tightened her grip on Naya, who slept with her tiny hand curled into her sister's cloak, unaware of the danger above. Ethan stood near the wall, adjusting a round device about the size of his palm. It blinked softly, then stopped. "What's that?" Lyra asked quietly. "Thermal bouncer," Ethan replied. "It tricks their sensors. Makes them think we're just a broken pipe, or heat from an old generator. Lyra nodded, trusting him without needing more. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the tunnel, not metal, not wind, but a voice. It was distorted, translated roughly by an alien speaker, but the meaning was clear. Come out. Those hiding will not be spared. Last warning. Ethan's jaw tightened. He pulled his rifle from the wall and handed a small stun baton to Lyra. I hope we don't need these, he said, but I won't let them take you. I won't let them take Nea, Lyra answered. They waited in silence, the kind of silence that hurt the ears, the kind that only fear could build. A distant thud broke it, then another, then closer. Footsteps, heavy ones. Lyra's heart raced. She held Nea tighter and whispered something in Zarellan, a lullaby maybe, or a prayer. Ethan signaled her to stay low, then moved toward the steel hatch at the end of the shelter. The only way in or out. The first shape appeared in the corridor outside, tall, armored in black, bone-like plating, with glowing red eyes and a plasma carbine gripped in its clawed hands. It stepped slowly, scanning the walls, unaware it had entered a trap. Ethan waited until the last possible second. Then he pressed the trigger. A flash of light burst through the corridor, followed by a heavy crash. The creature fell, but it wasn't alone. Two more slavers moved in fast, snarling in a language Lyra didn't understand. Ethan fired again, hitting one in the shoulder, spinning it into the wall. The last one ducked, firing back. A green blast slammed into the steel door, sending sparks across the floor. Lyra moved then, not away, but forward. She handed Nea to a soft blanket in the corner and gripped the stun baton tight as the last slaver stepped into the room. Lyra struck from the side, slamming the baton against its leg. The weapon hissed and crackled, electricity biting into alien flesh. The creature roared and twisted, raising its weapon. But Ethan tackled it from behind, driving his knife into the gap near its neck. Silence returned, broken only by Ethan's heavy breathing and the soft beeping of the thermal device. 3 slavers down, but how many more? Ethan leaned against the wall, wiping blood from his arm. Not his, but close enough. Lyra knelt beside Neha again, her hands trembling now, the fear catching up with her. You okay? Ethan asked, his voice rough. She nodded. I didn't let them touch her. She said, I saw, Ethan replied. You did good. They knew it wasn't over. Slavers didn't give up easily, and if a ground team was here, a larger force wouldn't be far behind. But something had changed. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were defenders, not of territory, not of pride, but of each other, and that meant everything, as the ship rumbled above, casting long shadows over the dead colony. Lyra whispered to her sister again, You're safe, I promise. And for the first time, she believed it herself. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing on the walls as Ethan recharged the rifle and Lyra cleaned the stun baton with careful hands. They had survived the first wave, but both knew more would come. Slavers never left survivors if they thought even one could fight back. Neha slept soundly again, unaware of the blood still drying on the floor just meters away. Lyra stayed beside her, humming the soft tune from her childhood, the one her mother used to sing when the stars were still gentle. Ethan checked the scanner, a square device blinking faint red in his palm. They're scanning the area again, he said, but slower now. Maybe confused, or maybe waiting, Lyra answered. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the edge in her voice. She wasn't the same girl from a few nights ago, the one who begged in the cold for milk. She was sharper now, harder, but still burning with something warm inside. I need to show you something, Ethan said. He led her to a box sealed with a biometric lock. After a scan of his thumb and a whisper of code, it clicked open. Inside were files, images, old data ships. and a single glowing orb the size of an apple. It pulsed with soft blue light. Like a heartbeat trapped in glass, Lyra stared at it, her lips parting in confusion. "That's Sorellan tech," she said slowly. Ethan nodded. "I found it 3 years ago, buried under a crashed pod outside the colony," he said. "Didn't know what it was, but when I brought it near a scanner, it reacted." He handed it to her, and as soon as her fingers touched it, the glow brightened. Suddenly, it projected a soft hologram into the air, a swirling language. Formed above their heads, elegant symbols glowing like stars. Lyra gasped. "That's a blood signature imprint," she whispered. "It only activates if the rightful bloodline touches it." Ethan blinked. "You mean it's yours?" "Not mine," she said, her voice unsteady. "Nea's." She turned to look at the sleeping baby, her heart now thundering in her chest. "She's marked," Lyra said. "That means she's important. Someone in our line was part of the old royal cast." Ethan sat back, stunned. "You're saying Naya is royal?" Lyra nodded slowly. The Sorellan lines were scattered after the Empire fell, but the blood keys still exist. And slavers, if they find out, they'll sell her to the highest bidder. Or worse. Now everything made sense, why the slavers hadn't killed them on sight. Why the patrol was heavier than normal. They weren't just hunting survivors. I think they were hunting value. And Nea was more than valuable. She was a symbol, a living piece of a lost crown. Ethan stood and began sealing the door tighter. "We're not waiting anymore," he said. "We have to move before they figure out where she is." Lyra picked up the orb, still glowing warmly in her hands. "Where will we go?" she asked. "To the outpost across the valley," Ethan said. "It's abandoned, but it has a long-range comms tower. If we can get a message out, maybe someone from your people will hear it." Lyra hesitated, then nodded. She strapped the orb into a pouch across her chest and slung Nea gently over her shoulder, wrapped in cloth and quiet dreams as they stepped into the tunnel. Ethan turned back one last time. He had lived in this colony for 5 years, lost everything in it, and now he was leaving it all behind again. But this time, he wasn't walking away alone. He had a child in his arms, a warrior by his side, and a purpose that burned brighter than any flame. They moved through the dark, toward the unknown, toward danger, toward hope. And as Lyra walked, her hand on the orb, pulsing with royal light, she whispered quietly to Nea, "I will protect you, little queen." The wind screamed across the valley like a wild thing, sharp with snow and broken whispers from the dead colony behind them. Ethan walked in front, his rifle ready, his boots cutting a trail through the white drifts. Behind him, Lyra held Nea close, the baby wrapped in warm cloth, her face hidden from the freezing air. They had been walking for 2 hours. The old sewer tunnels had led them to the edge of the mountains, and now the outpost was only a few kilometers away, hidden inside the cliffs like a scar. The orb in Lyra's pouch pulsed softly with light, reacting to something ahead, or maybe calling to someone she wasn't sure. Ethan stopped suddenly, raised his hand, and crouched low. Footprints in the snow, fresh ones, too large for Sorellan feet, too many for them to be alone. He held up 3 fingers, then pointed toward a cluster of rocks on the slope. Lyra nodded and crouched low, slipping into shadow with the baby still quiet in her arms. Voices echoed on the wind, rough, not human, not hers. The slavers had patrols in the valley too. 3 figures moved between the stones, wrapped in armor, carrying scanners and blades that buzzed faintly with energy. They weren't looking for a fight, they were hunting. One stopped, scanned the snow where Ethan's boot prints had begun, and tapped his comm device. Ethan didn't wait. He rose from behind the rocks and fired. The first shot dropped the lead scout before it could shout. The second shot grazed another shoulder, sending him stumbling back. The third slaver raised his weapon but fell when a stone struck the side of his helmet thrown by Lyra from behind the ridge. Ethan finished the job with a single clean shot. The silence after the fight was broken only by Nea's soft breath. In Lyra's arms, Ethan moved fast, grabbing one of the slaver's cum units and tuning it to a static channel. "They were calling for pickup," he said. "We've got maybe 15 minutes before a drone sweep comes looking." "Then we run," Lyra answered, tightening her grip on Neha. They pushed forward into the storm, the cold slicing deeper with every step. Ethan's jacket was soaked through, his hands numb, but he didn't stop, not with the cum tower so. Close, finally, through the snow, the outpost came into view. A black structure half buried in ice, its antenna rising high like the bones of a dead god reaching to the sky. Ethan kicked the door open and motioned for Lyra to step inside. The interior was dusty, dark, but safe for now. He powered up the console, the lights flickering. Then, stabilizing, the screen flashed blue. Then shifted to a cum interface. "Can you connect it?" Lyra asked. "I can try," Ethan replied, "but if the relay is still active." "Someone out there is going to hear us." He typed quickly, his fingers stiff, his eyes locked on the screen. A soft beep sounded. Connection established. The screen said, "Broadcast signal now live." Lyra stepped forward, placed the orb onto the pad, and spoke in her native tongue. A voice not of a child now, but of someone born with command in her blood. "To any Zerolins still listening, this is Lyra of the Lost Line, with Naya First Blood of the Queens. Descent?" She paused, swallowed hard, then added, "We are hunted, but alive. If you still believe in our people, come for us." The message played once. Then again, then the power cut. The signal had gone. Sent into the void, now they waited. They didn't know if it would reach a friend or an enemy. Didn't know if the slavers had heard it too, but they had done all they could. Lyra held Nea tightly and leaned against the wall, her body shaking not. From cold now, but from the weight of what might come next. Ethan sat beside her, silent, alert. Snow fell harder outside, and far above, something moved in the clouds. The sky above the outpost cracked with light, not thunder, not lightning, but a beam thin and blue shooting down from the clouds like a spear of fire. Ethan stood instantly, rifle raised, eyes sharp. "That's not a slaver signal," he said. Slowly, "That's something different." Lyra moved to the window, her heart pounding. Naya clutched tight against her chest, in the distance, through the falling snow. A new shape descended, not black and jagged like the slaver ships, but smooth, silver blue, like glass shaped by wind. The ship landed silently on a ridge, not far from the outpost. A soft humming filled the air, strange, but gentle. And then a voice came through the wind, not shouted, not mechanical, just spoken. "In the name of the Lost Line we answer." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Ethan. "They heard us," she whispered. The ship's ramp extended, and figures stepped out tall, elegant, clothed in long robes with symbols glowing across their arms. Not soldiers, not raiders, but royal guards. One of them, older, with gray streaks in her dark hair, stepped forward and looked directly at Lyra. "You carry the flame," she said, bowing her head, "and she," the woman added, gazing at Neha, "she carries the crown." Ethan stepped beside them, cautious. "What do you want with her?" he asked, his voice low. The woman looked at him and smiled, not cruel, not empty, but warm, like someone who had found something they had searched for too long. "To protect her," she said, "to rebuild what was lost, not a throne of power, but of peace." Lyra held Nea tighter. "Unsure, she is safe with us," the woman added. "But if you choose to stay, she will always be safest with you." Lyra turned to Ethan, her voice quiet. "Will you come with us?" she asked. Ethan looked out at the snow, at the cold, the silence. the ruins of everything he once knew. Then he looked at Lyra, at the baby who once whimpered for milk in a frozen alley, at the girl who once begged for a future she could never afford. He smiled gently, then nodded. "I will," he said, "until she's grown, and far beyond that." They stepped together onto the ramp. The ship's doors closed with a soft hiss, and the world outside fell silent once more. Above the valley, the ship lifted into the clouds, leaving behind the ashes of war and the bones of the past. Inside, Naya slept peacefully, cradled not just by her sister, but by a human who had once stopped in the snow because he couldn't walk past hunger, because he couldn't walk past hope, because when a starving girl whispered for milk, he had answered with more than kindness, he had answered with everything.